Okay, so real quick, what is this? This is the flow of energy, right? Consciousness, the presence of source taking form, right? These are some of the forms that we can group, right, and identify. Um, and these forms are expressions, right? Manifestations of the ever flowing energy, the ever flowing consciousness, the presence which manifests as reality, right? And all its attributes and elements, and there is presence certainly in most of these that is easily identifiable by anyone, right? These um, forms, most of these forms are living forms, right? So um, the presence, which is known to us as consciousness, as sentience, as identity, we can identify, in these things, animals, insects, plants, we can identify sentience, right? Which is a consciousness that has an awareness that um, can experience its existence, its environment. Okay, we can recognize that. But that isn't to say that objects aren't possessed of their own form of sentience, that there isn't a reality, a version of reality in which objects have awareness of some kind, right? That's been expressed in you know many different spiritual beliefs throughout history, right? The idea that a rock can have its own experience, its own existence, its own consciousness, right? Um, we kind of wrap sentience up in this ideal that experiencing has to be something that is familiar to us, that an experience has to be something that we can comprehend or understand, right? And increasingly, we separate the things that don't, or we don't perceive to um, share our experience as less and less sentient, right? The insects, less sentient than the animals. Why? Because the insects are bizarre, because the insects operate as a hive, as a colony, um, because their societies are frankly undesirable, right? The plants, because the plants don't seem to have the same autonomy as we do. They don't seem to be as free as we are in that. Um, that creates its own foreignness, right? Its own alienness, and in that alienation, the plants are seen as less aware or conscious sentient than we are, because they don't have the same specific form, because they don't have the same specific ability to communicate, because they don't have the same specific freedoms that we perceive ourselves to have. And then even among the group that we would put ourselves in, the animal group, we tend to separate ourselves and say that these other creatures do not have the same sentience, because they don't communicate the way we do, because they can't use tools the way we can, and so on. But in fact, every form that consciousness takes likely has the same level of sentience. It's just expressed differently. It's just a different experience, right? And that's a little bit tricky because we're always trying to pin down what defines something as fitting in this box or that box. But the thing is, each of the boxes has sentience, right? Each thing that can be each thing that is sentient, right? There is some element of consciousness in it that it shares the same soul, right? That black box that's recording the experience, right? It may be in a different format. It may that those experiences are received and filtered, but nevertheless, you can't negate or discredit those experiences, right? That transformation of form, the transition of form in itself is an experience, right? Growing older is an experience, right? A rock wearing down over time in the river is an experience, right? And that is back to omnipotence. As omnipotent being, you will be able to extract those experiences, harvest those experiences, right? And the omnipresence and omnisentience, while we could qualify them as two separate traits, they're actually two sides of a singular trait, right? The presence is all around us, and when it takes form, we say that it has sentience, right? So internal presence is sentience, and external presence is presence, right? That's the distinction. If it is external to you, then that is the presence of consciousness. And if it is internal to you, then that is sentience, right? And this is a simple depiction, right? A simple diagram. It's showing that the energy cycles through all things, right? And that the transition between the kind of energy we would label as form and the kind of energy that we wouldn't attempt to label as anything other than energy because of the flow, right? So in a sense, passive energy or fixed energy, right? How that's that's a cycle is interchanging, and in fact, every form that is taken, energy is constantly passing through it, restoring the form, right, and releasing the old energy, right? So then, in and of itself, that process is the cycle of change, right? If you could somehow lock your energy in stasis, then you will never change, right? Otherwise, you're changing all the time, constantly, right? So, anyway, check that out for a second. I don't know, pause it. Think about that process and what the implications of it are. And, there should be many implications that have been gathered from these last 3 videos that if you consider them, they will cause you perhaps to look at things differently, to understand things differently. Maybe even they have different goals and pursuits. Who is to say what this information means to one person or another, but here it is. It's out there. You know. So do what you will. Peace.